Thank you. It's really nice to see you all. Thanks so much for coming. So once again, I'm going to repeat what I said yesterday, which I know is going to get really boring to those of you that are coming to all 6 sessions, but welcome to our second programme of Native Creatives. Thank you to those that are coming following the very successful programme in the spring, and a warm welcome to those who are joining us for the first time. I'm Jen Langerscoff and I'm Education Programme Manager for Festival Bridge in East Anglia. By this time next year, Festival Bridge hopes to have created a network of creative arts teachers for both primary and secondary settings who have increased confidence, capabilities and passion for their personal creative endeavours and their professional lives. We've really tried to listen to you guys and plan what our termly programme is going to be for Native Creatives. So we like to think that we have co-designed it by you by taking on board the feedback from the last one and having a teacher focus group to talk about what went well, what you want from Native Creatives, and to try to keep the conversation going. And we think at Festival Bridge we're best placed to, or well placed to make Native Creatives happen because of our strong connections and relationships with teachers, educational settings, artists, educators and cultural and arts organisations across the region. This week's programme is called Making Positive Change, Advocacy, Subversion and Pioneership. And we devised this because of the things that you said from the last programme, and we really hope that the expert guest speakers that we have chosen for this programme will provide you with food for thought in developing and instigating change in your creative practice, both in and out of school. We encourage you to get involved with the Native Creative conversation by joining one or both of our social media groups on Facebook and Twitter. We've kind of commandeered the hashtag Native Creatives on Twitter if you'd like to follow the conversations that we are having. You can find all that information on the Festival Bridge website, and it's going to be posted into the chat box today, so you don't need to write anything down. We want to know what the direction of Native Creatives can be in the future. So what do you want to see in future programming? As in the last programme, we'll open a Jamboard at the end of the session for you to comment and make your suggestions. It's really easy. You just write on the sticky note as if it's a post-it and stick it underneath the question. Lewis, I know, will really appreciate your feedback. We really want it because it helps us plan for the next sessions and hear what you found interesting, what you want to know, what you're here for, what you'd like to know in the future. We also have the Mentimeter, which is just a way of us gathering who is attending Native Creative, so please make sure that you add to that. And I really encourage you at the end or during, if you'd like, to think about questions for our speakers. What might help you with your personal practice and your professional endeavours? How might a specific topic that one of our speakers has spoken about connect to something that you're working on? Or what advice would you like to seek from our speakers to help drive your ambition to make change? So please really think about your questions during the talk, or if you want to put them in the chat box, so that we can kind of get the conversation going towards the end, and it's not just myself and the speaker having a nice chat, which is always great, but we want to hear from you guys. So it's really great to see you, and I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes introducing our brilliant guest speaker that we are very lucky to have today. So Lewis Buxton is a poet, a performer and an arts producer. He is the co-director of Toast, which makes live poetry events and workshops with the best poets in the UK. Lewis is one of 6 local artists to be part of the Norfolk and Norwich initiative Creative Individuals Norfolk, that has emerged as a direct response to the COVID crisis, bringing vital cultural activities to communities during this crisis. Lewis is a poet whose work centres on male body image. Through poetry, he explores sexuality, sport and men's relationships with their bodies, focusing on making space for men's vulnerability and engaging their emotional literacy. Lewis is the author of Boy in Various Poses, published just in May this year by Nine Arches Press, and is available to buy from a number of excellent booksellers. He lives and works in Norwich and teaches creative writing in schools and is a first story writer in residence. Lewis's session today is about how to use poetry to make change, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome my new friend and very close neighbour, in fact about 5 doors up, Lewis Buxton. So thank you very much, Lewis, for coming.
Thank you so much, Jen. Hello everyone. Those lengthy intros are so odd because you have to sort of pretend that you didn't write that yourself. I think the only bit I didn't write was the creative individuals Norfolk bit. But thank you so much for having me. Thank you to Festival Bridge for having me. Thank you to the Norfolk and Orange Festival for existing. So today's session is called Turn and Face the Strange, how to use poetry to make change. I believe at a very fundamental level that poetry is the best way of communicating myself to the world. It is the best way of getting the world to understand me. And it is the best way of me understanding the world. In that way, it makes change. In that way, it helps me understand the world better. In that way, it helps me question the world better. I think one of the biggest obstacles, I think lots of people here, just looking at the board before, are coming from like visual art backgrounds, from being art teachers, from being heads of DT or heads of arts or performing arts. And poetry exists in this weird little space amidst all of this. It exists almost literally in the margins of the pages of our education system. It's small, it is supposedly unobtrusive, but people also often think it's boring. And part of the reason I think people think that is that they think poetry has some mystical truth in it, that poetry has some sort of answer that we're all supposed to be finding. That is not true. Poetry only has questions. And the best way to teach poetry, especially to like my particular speciality is working with like disengaged or like behavioral issue, mostly boys. The best way to engage them is to ask them questions, ask genuine questions. And in that way, you can use poetry to influence. I should be very clear from the beginning. I'm a big fan of Jen's term, artist teachers, right? And I consider myself to be the sort of the opposite, a teaching artist. But I think we all just exist on some point in the same spectrum. The reason I love that is that both my parents are teachers. My brother is a quantum physicist. My sister is a business manager, and I am a disappointment to them all. No, that is a joke. They very much respect what I do. They just don't really understand it. So they ask me questions about it. And the best first question that you can ask when it comes to poetry is the question, how are you feeling? I think that's the best question to ask at the beginning of any workshop. So I'm about to ask you guys that. I'm about to ask you, how are you feeling? And if you want to tell me in the chat, then please do. But there are 3 different ways that you can answer any question. In the same way, there are 3 different ways that you can write a poem. Or let's broaden this out, a story, a script, whatever it is. 3 different ways. Here are the 3 ways that you can write a poem. You can be honest, okay? So I'm now going to ask you, how are you feeling? And in the chat, I would like you to be brutally honest with me. How are you feeling? If I am being brutally honest with you, I'm feeling anxious. I don't know any of you. Jen is very much my new friend, but I also sort of want to impress her. This is like only the 2nd bit of work I've ever done for Festival Bridge, so I would like them to give me work again. God, this is too honest. But so I feel anxious. So if you could in the chat just tell me how you feel. I feel, and then tell me how you feel. And it can just be just brutally honest, as plain and simple as you can. I'll get the ball rolling. I feel anxious. Cool. I await your responses. I feel a bit sticky. I feel tired, hot, exhausted, also anxious. I feel too hot. These are all such legitimate, thoughtful responses. I feel relieved. Yes, 2nd jab. Go on, Rosie. I went to the very peculiar pharmacy 2U, which felt a little bit like going to a sci-fi film. I feel exhausted, also hot, enthused. Thanks for saying that. That's exhausted and overwhelmed. Emma, I'm very sorry if I am contributing to that overwhelming at all. I realize I am a lot. So like, this is an important thing to remember about teaching poetry in the classroom. Like, this is really joyful for lots of people. I also really try and make space for people who are quieter, people who are shy, people who don't want all this going on. Poetry doesn't have to be all this. It can also be quiet. Feeling uncomfortable, lovely. I feel like I should be cooking the dinner. Fair enough. No, Claire, leave it. Cook later. Get a takeaway. Eat some pita bread. Whatever. That's yeah. Anyway, okay, lovely. So that's the first way you can answer a question or write a poem. You can tell me how you feel. The second way is you can lie to me. Poems are not always true. I would be terrified if everyone thought that all the poems in this book were true. They would think I was, I mean, like, yeah, I'm not always mentally well, but they would not be, they would be worried about me. So lying is a completely legitimate way of writing a poem. So if I was lying to you right now, I would say, I feel confident. I feel like none of you are judging me. I feel like I'm absolutely crushing this. Like, if I was lying to you. So everyone lie to me. Tell me a lie about how you feel. It could just be the opposite of what you just said, or you can be more inventive. You can say, you know, I feel sexy. I don't know. That might not be a lie. I hope some of you do. I feel like a princess. I feel totally on top of my workload. I feel calm, cool, and collected. I feel like partying. Lovely. Cool. No one has ever really been on top of their workload. I feel so powerful and in charge. Thank you, Abby. Okay, wicked. I feel delighted that I drew Austria in... Lovely. Let's talk about the Euros later. I have a whole theory about why the Dutch national team are the most handsome team in the entire Euro football tournament. Anyway, okay. Here is the third and I think perhaps most interesting way of answering a question or writing a poem. And it brings us back to our title, Turn and Face the Strange. Is saying something, being strange in how you answer that question. So instead of saying, I feel anxious, or saying, I feel confident, find a new way of saying it. So instead of saying, I feel anxious, I might say, I feel like 3 cats in a postbox. Instead of saying, I feel confident, I might say, I feel like a fridge that has just been plugged in. Instead of saying, I feel uncomfortable, I might say, I feel hot eggs and gone off milk. I will give you 2 very good examples that are not based in poetry that will help you, I hope, understand this. The first comes from the canonical text, The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. So we're just going to watch this quick clip. You don't need to know anything if you've never seen this before, except that this character is called Bilbo.
I know I don't look it, but I'm beginning to feel it in my heart. I feel thin, sort of stretched, like butter scraped over too much bread. I need a holiday, a very long holiday, and I don't expect I shall return. In fact, I mean not to.
I always like to imagine that Bilbo is just a teacher at the end of term. And so instead of saying, I just feel tired, Bilbo says, I feel thin. I feel stretched like butter scraped over too much bread. That is a strange, different way of expressing how one feels. I'll give you another example, but start thinking about how you would express in a strange way how you feel. Okay, so now I need to get this to move. There we go. Okay, we are now going to listen to just the beginning of Blur's Coffee and TV from their, I think, 99 album, 13. This is just off the greatest hits as well. Okay, for anyone who missed that, The lyrics were, do you feel like a chain store, practically flawed, one of many zeros, kicked around, bored? Now, I love this as the first line of a song, lyric, poem, the wide spectrum upon which those different art forms sit. Partly because it does exactly what I just said. It answers the question, how do you feel? But in a strange way, do you feel like a chain store? And then it continues the metaphor, practically flawed, one of many zeros kicked around and bored. Zeros become sort of footballs, but they also like get into this monotony of life and that idea of like, I don't know why I always picture like a Wilkins or like Wilco's, like the same every place. That like that thing in like the beginning of the film Fight Club, where like there's a Starbucks in every town and his house just looks like every other flat. I also like that it's a question. Again, do you feel like a chain store? It is asking somebody, it's like reinventing the beginnings of this weird form that I'm setting out. And it is becoming strange. And in that way, it's asking a question about the world. And I think it is trying to change something. It is like a politically loaded song, which we can all thank our Norwich North Labour Party councillor, Dave Rowntree, who played the drums on this song. The other final thing I'll say that I really love about this is that I misheard this lyric for years. And I thought it was, do you feel like a chainsaw? And I am an anxious person. My brain goes approximately 100 miles, 180 miles an hour. I feel like a chainsaw most days. And I was like, oh my God, you know, me at like 12, 13, however old I was when I first listened to this album, being like, oh my God, I feel like a chainsaw. Thank you, Damon Albarn. So I'm going to stop sharing that. And I'm beginning to see people posting their strangeness in the chat. So if you could answer, I feel, and then tell me the strangeness of how you feel. I feel like I've rained all my glitter this year. I feel like a pot of ice cream that's been has made it back to the freezer just in time. Gorgeous, Rosie. That's amazing. I feel like a very long queue waiting in the sun with more people than oh, Emma. Yes. With more, like, so that detail of with more people than tickets, like, you've just articulated an anxiety that I have all the time when I'm standing outside any venue, any restaurant, anything. I do a weird thing, especially now. I feel like a grain of sand on a hot desert. This is beautiful. But that thing that Emma just articulated, with more people than tickets, that's how I feel outside every restaurant. I start like racing people who might not even be going to the restaurant to be like, I'm going to get there first and sit on a table. I feel like air inside a bubble, light but colorless, gorgeous. I feel like starting to listen to an album you recommended by a friend, but you're unsure you'll like. Oh, amazing. Perfect. What this proves is that any of you who have just turned up today, whatever your discipline, you all have this capability of language inside you. More than anything else, children, young people, students that you teach all have this capacity too. Everyone thinks that they can't be creative, that they can't write a poem. This is an incredibly simple activity to help them change their minds about that. And it's also very freeing. It doesn't have any rules. The only rule is you start with I feel, and then go anywhere you want. The next activity that I would give in addition to this, by the way, I'm going to send around notes of this via Jen, so don't feel like you need to write everything down. Oh, Ryan, that one's beautiful. Should have changed frantically into my wallet while a queue of customers are waiting. Again, I always feel like that. The next task that I would give is I do something called a free write. So a free write is when you give students a certain allotted amount of time and you give them a first line. So the first line might be I feel, and then just get them to take what Paul Klee, the artist, talks about, taking a line for a walk. So then you would take this line for a walk and just let it move wherever it wants to go. A free write, there are no rules. They don't have to spell anything correctly. They don't have to rhyme. That doesn't have to be a poem, a story. It could just be a string of random words if they want to. But it like releases the editor in the brain telling them like, you're not allowed to do this. That's rubbish. That's bad. Okay, so that's my first activity that I wanted to share with you that is big and free and and odd. The second activity I wanted to share with you is the following, and it's much more structured. Okay, what I would like you to do is, if you all have some sort of writing implement with you, that would be really useful. And or actually, you can just pop this in the chat if that's easier for you too. I would like you to make a very quick list of just clothes that you're wearing. I'm sort of hoping that the people who have all their cameras off are just sat there naked in the heat, just being like, oh no, I can't do it. Sean, I can't go on my Zoom meeting in full. I'm going to go naked. So Jen, please don't walk past my window. I'm not wearing any trousers. I am wearing trousers. I feel like I have to prove that to you all. So make a quick list, 5 things that you are wearing. Summer dress and underwear, thank you. That sounds like a Blur album. Or actually like a sort of later sort of like the Kooks, if you remember the Kooks, who were all from North London, but sang like they were from Leeds. Blue jeans, blue shirt, blue shoes, blue bracelet, blue earrings. Susan, you sound like you've looked wonderful. Cool. So yeah. God, Susan. Cool. Bandana, kimono type thing, yellow earrings, pants, lovely. Vest, shorts, earrings, lovely. Cool. So, the next thing I want you to do is make a list of verbs. This is where we can get into the sort of like the nitty gritty of language. The just verbs of things you've done today. So, for example, I have sunbathed. I have slept. I have walked. I eat. I danced. So yeah, make a list of verbs of things that you've done today. So zoom, 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 zoom. You've got 2 there. You've got 2 different verbs. You've got zoom and meet. Stare, that's nice. Beautiful. Talked, listened, thought. Lovely. Oh yeah, Louise, that's nice. Created. Ah, yes. I'm thrilled that someone has. Stood, stretched, typed, watched, folded, closed, sat, drank. Lovely. Sweated. Beautiful. Cool. Don't worry if you've only got 1 for each of these things. That's absolutely perfect. The final thing I want you to do is tell me where you did these things. So like, let's keep this really close to home or close to where, as we all are at the moment. And just start each sentence with in the. So I slept in the bedroom. I sunbathed in the garden. I walked in the park. Beautiful, cool. In Phil's office. In the big, oh, Rosie went to Big Sainsbury's. Rosie's had a day. Love it. We're going to Big Sainsbury's tomorrow because we're going on holiday to Suffolk. Yeah, yeah. Beautiful. Now, the final thing I want you to do is see if you can put those 3 elements together in a sentence. So for example, my t-shirt sleeps in the garden. Or my, what have we got? My kimono walks in Big Sainsbury's. My summer dress creates in the park. That's nice. As if the summer dress is a sort of creative force in and of itself. See what other ones we can come up with. My bra zoomed in the school playground. I hope not, but cool. My shorts swung in the hammock. Nice. My cropped leggings wander in the kitchen. Oh, the idea of cropped leggings wandering is gorgeous. So what we've done here is you've immediately created a sort of personification, right? You have immediately changed something that is boring, the clothes that you're wearing, what you've done today, and where you did it. My blue shone in the sunlight. My Vans taught in the classroom. My yellow earrings stared at the Zoom. Like, you've immediately created something strange and something different out of something mundane. Poetry is always a kind of metamorphosis, even if it is very simple. It is always an attempt to change something for the better, I think. That idea that Jen mentioned of positive change, like, obviously there is the gorgeous thing about poetry is there is all this space for negativity as well, for sadness, for whatever. But if you believe that there aren't necessarily negative emotions, just sort of like negative ways of processing them, I think that poetry is an incredibly powerful way of processing them. The final thing I'm going to do is I'm going to read you a quick poem, which I think brings together all of this stuff. It's not by me, it's by a wonderful children's poet. As I'm reading it, listen to the poem, think what you think about it, but also think about any questions that you have for me for the final 15 minutes of this session. So, I'm going to share my screen, and we are going to read. My friend Monica taught me how to say this name, Francisco X. Alarcón. Alarcón. He is a Mexican poet, and this is called Ode to My Shoes. My shoes rest all night under my bed. Tired, they stretch and loosen their laces. Wide open, they fall asleep and dream of walking. They revisit the places they went to during the day and wake up cheerful, relaxed, so soft. What I would encourage students to do of any age, I think this poem works with everyone from sort of 6 to 100, is ask themselves 3 questions about this poem. What do you like? What don't you like? And what questions do you have? We come all the way back to the beginning. How does it make you feel? Are there any words you don't understand? The one thing I just want to draw your attention to is that this first line follows exactly the formula that you just wrote a line in. My shoes rest all night under my bed, right? So you have created a line that is just as good as a published poet who has been writing for years. Alarcón is phenomenal and wonderful. I really encourage you to look up his work. Okay, all of that, I realize we've sort of like, we've zoomed through it all, but this, I will make sure that you get all of these links. I mean, you can find the Bilbo stuff and Blur's Coffee and TV all on your own, but I'll send them on anyway, and I'll make sure you get a copy of that poem. It is on the Poetry Foundation website as well, so that broadly means you can use it and there aren't copyright issues. So yeah, now I'm going to pass back to Jen. Let me surmise really quickly by going back to the first thing I said, that poetry is the best way of me understanding the world, and it is the best way of the world understanding me. I hope that in the last like 25 minutes, you now understand me a bit better. And hopefully you understand, if you've never interacted with poetry before, you understand that a bit better. I think it is joyful, I think it is wonderful, and I think it is the most important thing that exists in my life, and the most useful. Especially useful because it helps me work in schools, write books, whatever it is that I'm doing, make theatre shows, and in every way, whether it is to do with like gender, whether it's to do with like masculinity, whether it's to do with climate crisis, whether it's to do with politics, whatever it is, poetry genuinely helps. Jen, I'll pass it back to you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Lewis. That was brilliant. I've only been to a few of your, maybe 2 other of your workshops, and they are all brilliant. They're all different and they are all brilliant. Cool. And I really like that kind of idea about you use poetry about to understand the world. We've had quite a long chat before, haven't we, where we've walked around the park, our local park, talking about what we use to help navigate and understand the world. I use visual art for that, and I think everybody, in this room, as creative art teachers, as practitioners, could identify with that. We all utilize something creative to make better our understanding of the world, and that is how children do it too, isn't it? And if they know how to utilize painting or using words or using their bodies as in action or whatever it might be, it's going to be beneficial to them. There's no 2 ways about it. And I think that kind of really jumps on the back of the talk that Andrea Zafaruku was talking about yesterday, in that you've just got to tap into that one thing with children to help them release that thing that helps them understand the world. And I really like this idea about, you said that free writing releases the editor in the brain. We are given that opportunity to use our brains freely, then, you know, lots and lots of different things can be released, can't they? And it's so true of all the creative arts. So rather than me banging on, I think it would be brilliant to hear from our audience if you've got some questions, possibly about a project that you're working on with your kids at school, or about something you're working on in your own creative practice, or just some advice you'd like from Lewis about the work that he does. It would be really great.
There's a really great question in the chat of how do you support pupils who find it difficult to express themselves? And specifically, Susan has asked about EAL students. I'll try and answer these in one question. How do you support pupils who find it difficult to express themselves? This I understand is a real challenge, especially in like state education systems where you have 30, 32, 34 students in a class. And it's really difficult to understand, like, how does it make this, what makes this one person tick? I think like trying out those two different methods and seeing whether the idea of freedom really works well for someone, whether it's like just giving them a piece of paper and saying like, start with I feel, and they just need a little prompt and then let them run with it. The other option is to give them creative constraints. So again, what we would call in the classroom, like differentiation and scaffolding, right? Like, how do we scaffold a poem for a young person? For example, reading a poem like Francisco Alarcon's and being like, okay, how has he made this? It is a made thing in the same way a piece of visual art, a painting, a sculpture, or whatever is a made thing. How has he put that together? Can I break it down to like the basic units of language, adjectives, nouns, verbs, you know, content and functional words? And therefore, can I make it relevant to this person? So at what point does your student sit on the sort of scale of creative constraint or absolute freedom? Because some children don't want anything. They don't want you to give them any constraint. They've got their ideas. They want to just run with them. Specifically for EAL learners, the two things I would suggest is everything that I've just said. Perhaps structure is more useful for them. The second thing is really encouraging them, especially within creative writing, to engage with their first language. So there is a wonderful anthology called England, Poems from a School, which was published by Picador, and it's a teacher called Kate Clanchy, who wrote a book called Some Kids I Taught and What They Taught Me. And lots of the poems in that have multiple languages in them, have Arabic, Portuguese, whatever it is, and they mold in with English. So like translation is as much an important and creative act as just writing. So if they can write something in Arabic, in Turkish, in like whatever their first language is, and then another creative task for them can be translating it. And the lovely thing about poems is that they can be tiny. Like if there is one kid writing in English and you say to them, the kids always ask like, oh, how long does my poem need to be, sir? And I'm always like, oh, they can be as long as you want. And that immediately makes a kid go, oh, okay. And they write, you know, so one kid can write 400 lines, another kid can write 5 or 3. And those are as valid as one another within the context of poetry. It's why I like it. I have attention problems. I struggle to focus on stuff. Poems are brilliant because none of them go over the, Simon Armitage says, poems are naturally defiant because they rarely meet the bottom of the page and never the edge. That's not true of my poems. Those of my poems reach the edge of the page, but like, I like the fact that like line breaks exist, that poems can be super small and still be worth something. Cool.
Thanks, Lewis. Can I, I'm just going to, Rosie, I wonder if you might just unlock your and just tell us a little bit about the Barbican Box project, because I think it's a really good thing to talk about if you're happy to do so, and I'd like to hear more about it.
I've unlocked my face and then unlocked my microphone finally. I've just been involved in a brilliant project as a visual artist, but working with a couple of primary school classes in Kings Lynn and Beecham, spinning off Michael Rosen's poetry and working off the back of that to extend it into my practice and to get the young people doing some art. So I've been thinking a lot about poetry and visual art and where the two kind of combine, if you like. And there's been lots of in my personal practice, it's kind of felt really like it's made sense in terms of kind of gathering, in the same way a poet might gather words and phrases from places. I kind of tend to gather collage imagery on colour and snippets of bits and bobs and kind of mix them together. But my question to you, Lewis, was really, have you had projects where you've collaborated with visual artists in any way, and what have you enjoyed about that synergy?
So I actually worked on the Barbican Box project. So I was doing it. It was one of the projects I was supposed to be. That I did a sort of version of it mid-pandemic with Creative Arts East and the Barbican. So I worked with John something. And yeah, it's really interesting experience. I really like visual art, and and so like that was cool. Like that was for developing like sort of education workshops. The two artists that I really like who work specifically in sort of like that intersection, like I think it's Robert Montgomery, who he was at the Norfolk and Norwich Festival this year. He worked with Deanna Roger, and he has those big like light up poems. They're incredible. Tracy Emin has a similar sort of thing in like a second, not the exhibition she's got on at the moment, the one before that was lots of luminescent. I mean, she's always used words in her work, but like she had like fluorescent stuff. And then I suppose like I worked with a visual artist really intently on the front cover of this, which involved like my poems and an artist called Anita Staff responding to them. I've never really done that thing of like working at every stage. One thing has always been created before the other. So like either the poems have been created and then the art has responded to it, or the art has been created and then I've responded to it in poems, like that ekphrasis form of writing. I'd love to do more. I'm always intrigued. I like chatting, as you can see, so I enjoy working with other people. And yeah, I'd also love to, vague conversation. I'm really into like movement and bodies and physicality and sport. I'd love to collaborate with people who are like, this would be cool. Wouldn't it be cool to do like a poetry PE lesson? Like where you like do PE and then like, and it would be called running lines, and like you'd like run and then you'd write lines. It would be great. It would be fun. So yeah, I don't know if that answered your question or I just talked about my own projects, but thanks.
I think, yeah, that's great. I love that idea. I've thought a lot about so I do these like exercise classes in the gym, and I thought a lot about what if I had a paintbrush in my hand and I was kind of just mark making as I did it, and I'm too scared to ask the
a bit like when people cover themselves in paint and then have sex.
Yes,
and then make like sort of body
like
art. Yeah,
I guess so.
That's exactly the same.
And I actually, just thinking about that, I saw a pupil once in a school who filled balloons with paint, and he was really good at golf, and he knocked them onto a canvas, so they exploded onto the canvas, and that was really amazing.
A bit like in the seminal 2001 film Princess Diaries, where a very young Anne Hathaway and her mum throw darts at balloons full of paint and create a sort of splatterboard.
I'll have to revisit that. I think
it's canonical, Jen. It's canonical. You'll find most of my references come from really. This is an important thing to say to
terrible
kids. I think. Well, I think it's an important thing to say. It's not a terrible film. It's what's his name? The one who made like anyway. the thing that I think it's really useful to think about is that there is no such thing as like low or high art. That like all of this art, if you are inspired by watching Princess Diaries, then watch Princess Diaries.
Absolutely.
Like my pal has this, there's an amazing book called Museum of Ice Cream, which I'll show you. And there is an entire poem in this book that is inspired by the OC, as in the mid-noughties teen drama, and it's incredible. So yeah, this book, Museum of Ice Cream by Jenna Clake, I would really encourage people to yeah. Thanks, Ryan, for engaging with my film criticism.
Sorry.
No, it's really sad.
Yeah, it's not good hosting, is it?
No, it's great hosting. Jen, you're doing a phenomenal job. We really should have done this just shouting down College Road.
We could have done.
Or in one of our gardens. It would have been.
I know. That wouldn't quite work for the people that don't live in Norwich, but other than that, it worked. So thank you, Lewis, for doing this. That was really, really brilliant. And I think I could see lots and lots of smiling faces as you were talking. And I think everybody can safely say they've had a really lovely 45 minutes of listening to you about poetry and the changes that you can use with poetry. And yeah, that was brilliant. So thank you.
If people have more questions, then like I am on the Twitters or the Instagrams. I think somebody posted the links to them earlier. Like feel free to like tweet and ask me questions. Like I'm always up for that. Not tonight because I'm watching the football and I'm hot and then I'm on holiday, but I will get back to them at some point.
You're pretty good on Twitter, I would say. Yeah,
that was my favorite moment ever at a gig. I'll just quickly tell you and then you can stop this. My girlfriend was sat in the front row of a gig I was doing, and she heard a woman in front of her next to her go, "Who's that man over there?" And her daughter turned to me and said, "That's Lewis Buxton. He's very funny on Twitter." And I was like, yes! This was in like York. I was like, oh my God, made it. He's funny on Twitter. Cool. Thank you so much, Jen. Thank you, Festival Bridge. You guys are phenomenal. Thank you all for coming and being hot with me.
Thank you very much. And please do fill in our feedback on the lovely Jamboard. It's very quick. You don't have to write much.
Jamboard.
Note on, and it's great for Lewis, and it's really good for us to know what you want from Native Creatives, and join all our social media groups and the hashtag Native Creatives. And tomorrow we've got Paul Carney following this, who's an artist illustrator, and tomorrow we have Laura Jones from Stopgap Dance, who is talking about movement and disability, and then we have Dr. Claire Penketh, who is a lecturer in cultural studies and disability, and those two will work really nicely together and will be a brilliant end to our Native Creatives Week. So thank you very, very much, everybody, for coming, and thank you, Lewis. You've been amazing.
Thank you so much.
See you soon. Bye.